Right then, welcome back. Today we're doing a setup video again, and we're doing the S1000RR, the 2019, the BMW. I should have said that in the right order, shouldn't I? But yes, so before we get into the meat and veg of it, however, obviously I did the Aprilia, and whilst it was okay, it has highlighted some things that I probably need to talk about and mention, which I always expected it to, and my biggest fear was the way people ride the bikes, ride in air quotations or inverted commas or whatever we're going to call them. So different people use the bikes different ways, different people like corner speed, different people like pointing and squirting. Thank you, Mr. Joe Thornton, for that lovely phrase. It is now in my book of tricks to use, and it's Mr. Joe Thornton that we have to thank really for giving me some excellent feedback. So thank you, buddy. I really appreciate it. I really do. And yeah, preload. So on the screen is the setup for the BMW. Very top is the preload. So preload does two things. One, it alters how far over the bike will lean in the game. Two, it affects how quickly the bike will move from side to side. I've said that before, I've done a couple of setup videos in the past, and that's what it basically does. Now, with the race bikes, you can alter the rake and trail to make the bike react quickly when you turn the preload down. On road bikes, you can't, so it's a constant compromise. So, these setups are not designed to be the be-all and end-all. What they are is a baseline setup that works pretty much everywhere, probably apart from Monza, because nothing works at Monza because the tyres just go cold, because when the bike's going in a straight line, apparently in the game the tyre temperature drops off. It's funny because if I do 180 mile an hour on a private bit of road on my motorbike, you can cook an egg on the tyre, so I'm not quite sure how it works, but hey ho. So yeah, the setup's designed as a baseline. So if you think, this bike's a bit slow, I want to turn the preload up, that's cool, but turn the spring down a little bit, because then you will offset the pre-engagement that the preload provides by softening the spring, if that makes sense. It makes sense to me, I hope it makes sense to you. And I'm sure that half the people who are listening to this go, what's he on about? Preload spring rate. So, at the risk of being fingered for mansplaining things, preload is the engagement of the spring. Preload does not increase spring rate. That is an absolute myth. Preload pre-engages the spring. So if you take a clicky pen, when the nib is in and you push down on the top of it, I have one in my hand right now, so I apologise if you hear it clicking in the background. When you push down, it's stiff, there's resistance, because the mechanism inside the pen is engaging the spring straight away. When you extend the nib, yeah, clunk click, when the nib is out the bottom, there's now a massive amount of slack in the plunger, in the button, or whatever we're calling it at the top, because the spring is pre-engaged by the mechanism holding the nib out the bottom of the pen. On a motorcycle, and I don't like using the phrase, but in the real world on a motorcycle, you unwind all the preload and you get to the point where the preload adjuster is just off the top of the spring. So you've got a little bit of slack before you start engaging the spring. If you wind the preload in, which you do to adjust for rider weight, which we can't do on the game, I've mentioned that before, when you wind the adjuster in, what you're doing is you're pre-engaging that spring. So if you had a progressive spring in there, a spring that got progressively stiffer as you went down, as in the spring rate increases as you go down the spring, you can alter the way that the bike reacts initially to braking and throttle inputs using preload. When I set bikes up, when I set my wife's bike up and my bike up, the first thing I do is I undo all the adjusters, turn them onto fully open, wind the preload off, and then get a tape measure out, and we spend a couple of hours in the garage setting the spring rate. I'm contradicting my own brain here. setting the preload so that the spring's engaged. You can't change spring rate unless you change the springs. Idiots. Anyway, that's what we do. You can't do that in the game. What you can do is use the preload to adjust the way the bike reacts and then drop the spring rate down if you increase the preload up. I hope that makes sense. So if the bike's a little slow, although Joe and other point and squirters that might be watching this bike is very much a point and squirt bike. So when I go onto the next screen, what I'm going to do is I'm going to list a couple of pros and a couple of cons of what the bike is good for. So this is very different to the Aprilia, which, kudos to Milestone and the developers of the game, the RSV4-R, its frame architecture is basically roughly a 250 GP bike in size and stature, and that's the way that it rides. High corner speed, big lean angles, get on the gas on the way out and it'll carry speed. The BMW doesn't do that. I don't know what bike they benchmarked when they built the S1000, but it certainly wasn't an Aprilia RSV4-R. This is a different kettle of fish completely. Setup wise, we end up there. So that is the saved file that I made, when was it, 2nd November? I haven't really been on the game the last few days. My wife is working away at the minute, so when she comes back at weekends, I don't tend to go near my Xbox. I just tend to leave it alone, and we do husband and wifey things, and well, we don't. We sit in the house and watch rugby and watch Australia get spanked by Wales, not by Wales, by Scotland. Unlucky. But anyway, we digress. Yeah, that's where we ended up. So, pros and cons of this bike then. Pros, it is fast. Oh my giddy aunt, she's quick. She's really fast. It is way quicker than the Aprilia. And not only that, it lets you V the corners. So Mr. Joe Thornton, point and squirt all day long. The downside to that is it murders rear tyres, as we'll see in a minute when we go onto the tracks that I was using it at and a little bit of a validation check. It murders rear tyres, absolutely 100% murders rear tyres. To stop it crucifying the tyre, I've had to turn the preload up a little bit, and then we've dropped the spring rate down, so we also have a little bit of a wheelie problem. But she's fast. Oh my good lord, she is quick. Quick. So, yeah, where do we go? Well, we did Brands Hatch Indy and tried our best to torture a soft rear tyre to death, and we nearly did it. And this is straight out of the box, one of the first tracks I used. We dropped the 13th quickest time and the fastest S1000RR. So there you go, challenge accepted. Be a quicker S1000RR on that leaderboard. And then we went to the Nürburgring Mullenbachschleife, the most German sounding track in the world, in the rain, and the tyres worked there as well. Then we went to Brands Hatch GP, and again, murdered a rear tyre. I'm not running any traction, the traction's off, so if you turn the traction on, you will save the rear tyre a bit. Cadwell Park Club, the balance of the circuit's slightly different, a bit more front-endy. Alton Foster's, do you know what, I am a big fan of this place at the minute. The undulations and everything else. A bit more rear tyre abuse. Again, that was on a medium tyre. Then I went to Cadwell Park on a medium front, medium rear, and I should have really gone for a soft front because it was a little bit cool, but it is what it is. Then we went to Mugello, we did 5 laps at Mugello on the club circuit. I think that was in the wet, it just struggled, didn't want to use any traction just to see what it did to the tyre, and it did struggle a bit for grip. Then we went back to the Nürburgring, went on the GP circuit for 5 laps. Hard track to keep temperature in the front tyre there, you'd probably get away running the soft, whereas I was running the medium. And then Imola Variante Bassa, so bottom chicane, sounds better in Italian, doesn't it? And then we did 5 laps there, couldn't catch the South African rider, but again the tyres were there or thereabouts. Back to Alton Park International, and yeah, we ended up doing 25 laps of the place, and this is pre-Aprilia lap, by the way, and went 5th fastest. Not quite the fastest BMW there, a couple of tenths of a second away, but yeah, that's where we end up. It's a baseline setup, remember that, it's a baseline setup. So if you want less wheelie, drop the preload a click, but turn the spring rate up. Alright, and if you turn the spring rate up, turn the compression dampen on the rear shock up a little bit just to absorb that initial push if you get on the gas. If you use aggressive calibrations for acceleration, turn the rear compression damping up, and if you're on braking, turn the front compression damping up, and it will just absorb that initial hit from when you're smashing the throttle and the gas. A bit of feedback I've had from other people is that the Aprilia was a bit loose on the back. Yeah, it was, you're right. It was all about the corner speed. It's not going over as far on the tyre. The problem is it's got loads of power. So as soon as you go over on the edge of the tyre, it was sending the tyre orange and red and then crucifying everything and spitting me off the side. So yeah, so that's where we're at. Hopefully with a little bit of preamble before we got into where we've been and what we've done about the preload helps. And again, give me loads of feedback. Thank you for watching. I really appreciate it. I'm going to keep doing. Next one is MT09, and then we're going to do a Ducati, and then I'm going to go down the list. So yeah, thanks for watching. I really appreciate it. Don't forget to leave me a like. Hit me a comment. Let me know how you're getting on. Let me know how it is. And fingers crossed, I will see you next time. Stay safe. Peace.